I recently saw this interview from the chief economist over at CoxAutomotive, Jonathan Smokes, and it is absolutely alarming. And I'm going to let him show us exactly what's happening in the car market.
I would argue at least 50% of the market is almost completely priced out of being able to buy the way that they traditionally would.
Wait, so what do you mean by that? 50% of the market is priced out of the car industry?
I mean, at the end of the day, if you think about retail, the retail vehicle market, it is a financing market. People, the most important number is the monthly payment. And when you look at what the households in the U.S., the distribution of their incomes, about half can only afford about a $400 payment. And it is really difficult to produce a $400 payment in either the new or the used market today because of the combination of vehicle prices and interest rates.
I absolutely could not believe it when he shared the staggering statistic that over 50% of people who are in the market to purchase vehicles in the United States are actually priced out, meaning they can no longer afford these cars because prices are so high. And mainly when people look to purchase a vehicle, they primarily focus on what their monthly payment is so they can gauge whether or not they can afford it based on the other bills and the income that they have. Most people in the United States need to land somewhere at around a $400 car payment. And now the average car payment in the US sits around over $700. So things have wildly changed in the last couple years. That got me thinking, well, what is someone to do when they absolutely need a car, especially to get to and from work, maybe get their kids to school, and just some of life's essential when the affordability isn't there, not in the new car market or the used car market because of all the madness of the last few years. So I started searching around to see what is going on in the market and what is someone to do should they find themselves in this position. And what I found was really interesting and surprising. Now, the number one thing that really caught my attention was a story that I saw on used car leases making a comeback. And I found this to be absolutely fascinating. Now, used car leases are something that have been around for many, many decades, right? It started over 20 plus years ago, and it was actually really seeded by credit unions who are trying to get into the game and kind of compete against captive lenders. And so they were offering these used car leases. And in the beginning, it was really popular because they were getting a lot of traction with their customer base. But what ended up happening is during that time, many, many years ago, when the leases on these used cars ended, these cars really weren't worth much. And so these lenders were left with cars that were just sitting there in their parking lots and were absolutely worthless. Now, fast forward 20 years, a lot of stuff has changed in the industry. Now, Cox Automotive is a company whom we just saw Jonathan Smokes from that provides all sort of technology in the industry to help dealerships, auction houses, and anyone who is in the automotive business to better value cars and to actually anticipate what a car might be worth 2-3 years down the line after it's accumulated all of its utilization and mileage from a lease so that you know what your residual value is. Now, for those of you that may have leased cars in the past or are currently leasing, you'll notice that a part of your lease contract, you will always see the dealer provide a residual value. And that's precisely what it means. It's essentially what the car is worth after you turn it back to the dealership after your lease term. So back then, when people were returning their vehicles, the lenders were left with these cars that just weren't worth much. But these days, because we have way more accurate reporting and data, we can really accurately determine what a car might be worth after 2 to 3 years of leasing it. So now what's happening, because there's been such a supply chain shortage for new cars and lenders still want to lend, but there isn't as much business to be had because interest rates are high, used car prices are high, new car prices are high, there is actually starting to become a little bit of a comeback of what we call used car leases. Now, this has really come to fruition because of a few things. Number one, the quality of cars these days are getting better and better. So cars can actually withstand having more than one owner, each owner having that car for 6 years, creating the perfect opportunity to create a second lease out of a car. So if a car gets leased for 3 years, comes back, it can get leased again and again, creating these used car leases. Now, most car buyers or car leasers are not familiar with this concept because we just haven't seen it much in the last decade or so. But given the market conditions, it seems to be making a comeback. Now, the next thing is because of what's gone on in the car market and people not being able to afford new cars and the really high prices on used cars, it's actually finally has created a market for used car leases, which we really haven't seen in the last decade. So this means that there is demand now for people looking to lease used cars, because typically on a used car lease, on a car that's at least 3 years old, sometimes has 40,000 miles on it, you are seeing monthly payments that are 40% less, which is absolutely an incredible deal for somebody who needs affordability and reliability when it comes to a vehicle. Now, if you're a Turo host, this actually also creates a perfect scenario as well. Because used car leases are cars that are a few years old, the depreciation has already hit, monthly payments are maybe 40% less, that actually makes it into an ideal type of car that would be perfect for the Turo platform. Now, the problem in my research is that it is extremely hard to find dealerships that are doing used car leases. It's not something that is heavily advertised just yet. And this is why this is a trend to really look out for, and in fact to search for if you're looking for a car that is reliable and affordable and just overall a great deal. Now, one of the things that I found is you really have to dig deep into the web to figure out which brands might even be offering these used car leases. And in my findings, I found that Toyota dealerships and Honda dealerships tend to rank very high. But even when you go on their websites, you actually won't find much. You actually have to go into the dealership, talk to a salesperson, and figure out if they do a used car lease on a certified pre-owned vehicle. Now, the interesting thing is, and I think this is actually really good for our consumer market, is that manufacturers are only allowing dealers to do used leases on certified pre-owned vehicles, which is fantastic because for the consumer, for people like us, it means that we are getting a car that's going to be really reliable, it's been maintained well, and there is probably going to be some sort of warranty a part of that deal to know that you're not getting a car that's going to continue to break down on you, or that you might be responsible for any additional maintenance costs. So this is a really interesting finding that I saw that could be a major answer to the affordability crisis that exists in the market. And the problem that I'm seeing right now is that as time goes on, it might take many years for us to correct this market, for the supply to catch up, for interest rates to come down. And the fact is, we just didn't have that many new cars in the last couple of years, which means in the future, there aren't as many used cars, because if we didn't sell as many new cars, then it doesn't create used cars by default. So dealerships and brands are really going to get way more creative on how they can offer affordable cars to consumers and also open up markets for themselves as well. Because if interest rates are high, prices are high, well, then it's going to make it really hard for consumers to be able to afford that. Now, the last finding that I had, which I thought was super interesting, is I Googled a bunch of keywords, right? Looking for used car leases, dealerships with used car leases, certified pre-owned vehicles that can be a used car lease. And one thing I noticed in every single search was that the #1 ad placement on Google was Turo. And it seemed like Turo was really targeting long-term affordable rentals for their platform. So to me, it seems like Turo has sort of touched on the fact and tuned into the fact that there is an affordability crisis in the market, and they could potentially serve that need while consumers figure out how they can permanently afford a vehicle. And so if you're a host watching this video, that could be good news in that you'll be finding guests who are looking for long-term rentals, especially if you are offering affordable vehicles. Now, if you want to figure out exactly what you can do to find the best deal on a car, check out this video that I made recently. It's going to walk you right through it.